Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is November 8th, 2023, and have I got a show for you. It is always so fantastic whenever I get to talk to an author who also knows so much about being a journalist and editing and marketing. She is a font of information. If you are an author, you're going to want to listen to her. If you are a reader, you're going to want to check out her book. So without any more hesitation here, let's just go right to the interview. Please welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart, Lynne Golodner.
I'm Lynne Golodner. I live in Detroit with my husband and a rotating cast of my 4 young adult kids. And I would say I'm a writer first and foremost. I always have been since I was very young. But I also am an entrepreneur. I've been a journalist. I have taught writing for decades, and I've been a marketing and public relations entrepreneur for 16 years. So that's sort of the short introduction, but I'm sure we'll get into all the details.
Yeah, you don't sound busy at all.
Oh, no.
It's one of those things, whenever I hear somebody say, it's like, yes, it's like I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm an entrepreneur and an author. And the thing that always pops in my head is, when do you sleep?
Yeah, I really try to, but there are nights where I'm just tossing and turning because my mind won't shut off. And so I do my best.
What did you study in college?
I went to the University of Michigan for undergraduate, and I studied communications and English. And my goal was to become a journalist, and I actually did that in college. I freelanced for the Ann Arbor News. I worked for the Michigan Daily, and any chance I had, I was writing for anybody who would publish me. And so I graduated, and I moved to New York, and I was a journalist. Then I was transferred to Washington, D.C., was a journalist there, and came back to Michigan in the late 90s and continued on that journalistic path until about 2007, 2008. Yeah, that was how I got started.
So what was your favorite beat to cover?
Gosh, I wrote about family, faith, home. I did a lot of architecture, interior design, that kind of thing, construction. But I liked writing a lot about food, not to review restaurants or taste food, but it was more about what food means and how it connects people, how it builds community, how it cements identity. And so that was really probably my most fun topic.
Whenever I started out in journalism, I did a lot of health reporting and entertainment. And I actually enjoyed the health the most, but I have the best stories from the entertainment part.
Of course.
After you got done being a journalist, you became a writer. You started doing nonfiction books, and you have quite a few.
Well, actually, I'm just going to amend the timeline a little bit because I did my MFA, Master of Fine Arts in Writing, in the 90s while I was in New York and Washington. So I started writing books then, really. And my MFA was in creative writing. I focused on poetry. And the master's thesis was a manuscript that would be ready for publication. And I had the good fortune to have that manuscript accepted by a small press. And so I arrived to graduation in 1996 with a box of books, and it was just so exciting. So my very first book that was published was a collection of poems, and my second book was another collection of poems a number of years later. But then all the nonfiction books really came after that and sort of dovetailed with my journalistic career. So a lot of my books, in fact, really, I would say the first 8 books that I had published were labors of love and things that I did on the side, but I never really looked at them as a way to make money or took it seriously enough to make it my career. Not until this most recent book, my first novel.
I'm really fascinated by one of the books that I saw on your list on Amazon, Hide and Seek, Jewish Women in Hair Covering.
Yeah.
It was not too long ago that I realized how many Jewish women actually wear wigs.
Well, it's Orthodox women, not anybody in conservative or reform circles, but I spent 10 years as an Orthodox Jew, and I was so curious about why and how and all the reasons behind hair covering. And there were no books. There was nothing. There's so many books about all different facets of Jewish observance. And this one, which I found to be highly transformative because I always had thick curly hair. People knew me for my hair. And I'm like, you want me to cover it? And I felt like I probably wasn't alone in feeling that transformation really deeply. And so since there were no books, I said, well, okay, I'll write the book that's needed. And I put it together. I did a lot of research because I was curious. I wanted to know where this observance came from, what was the basis for it, all the different opinions. In Jewish law, there are many different opinions for how you do something. And so a lot of rabbinic debate from centuries ago. So I have a whole section in the beginning that introduces the concept and presents all the research. And then the rest of the book is a compilation of essays that I collected from women, from people around the world about the practice of hair covering. So mostly women, but there's a husband in there. There's all different people to show different aspects of this practice. And I wrote a couple of the chapters interviewing women who maybe couldn't write it themselves for whatever reason. So it's like an anthology, I would say, to try to present all different perspectives on this practice.
Is this when you started getting interested in helping other authors to create their stories?
That's a great question. I don't think so. I think that really came about the more I got into my teaching. So I've been teaching writing since I finished my MFA, but it's really in the last 5 years that I have doubled down and focused on helping mostly women and mostly at midlife find their voice and build the confidence to write and help them work toward having a manuscript that is publishable and then talk about how to do that. So I think it's pretty recent.
Now, when you're talking about helping them publish, are you helping them find an agent in a publishing house or self-publishing or both?
So I do a lot of writing coaching. So I work one-on-one with a lot of writers. So that could be coaching them through the options and deciding what's best for them. But I also did start a publishing house this year called Scotia Road Books. And it's a hybrid press for women over 40 with strong voices that need to be heard. And I did that because as I was looking to publish my novel, I had all different ideas and opportunities. I even was offered a publishing contract from a small press. A lot of agents were interested in it. And I just wanted to do it my way, and so I thought, okay, let me look at this and let me see what is possible. And then once I really discovered the process, I thought, well, I could help other writers through this too. I didn't think it was hard. It was actually a lot of fun. And I loved the way I've put this book out. And yeah, so that's really where I came to the approach of helping other writers get their books out there. I guess it's the entrepreneur in me that's like, oh, there's a need. Let me fill it. It's like, I'm not busy enough. What else can I take on? So yeah, something like that.
When did you put together the Make Meaning podcast?
That started in 2018. It was inspired by my dad, who was diagnosed the year before with a fatal leukemia, and we didn't know how long we would have him with us. So I really started it to interview him and gather his stories. The idea was to really talk to people about how they make meaning and find purpose. And my dad and I were super close. He was my best business advisor. I mean, I talked to him all the time, and I just thought, I need to get everything because I don't know if I have 2 months or 2 years or whatever. And so the podcast launched on his 80th birthday, which we celebrated. He was still with us. And then on his 81st birthday, the 1-year anniversary podcast featured him as well. And unfortunately, we lost him about 7 months later. So at least I have those 2 episodes, which are great, but it really launched a whole show that is still going. And as I pivoted my career to focus more on my writing and helping writers, I pivoted the podcast to focus on authors and people publishing. So that's pretty much who I feature these days. But yeah, we've had a lot of episodes and a lot of really cool people.
That's one thing I was noticing on your bio is it says that you've had a few career pivots.
Yes, that is so true. Yes.
Besides being the full-time journalist and an author and the founder for, I'm going to say this wrong, Scotia Road Books?
You got it right. Good job.
Hey, all right. What else are you looking to get into?
The truth is, I'm looking to get out of things. I'm just doing so much. And, the one thing we didn't talk about was in 2007, 2008, I had a pretty significant pivot where I left journalism full time and created a marketing company. And so I've done that ever since. And I've written on the side. And as I pivoted to get back to my writing, I shrank the business. I didn't dissolve it, but I shrank it because I really wanted to put my writing first and foremost. And so I spend about 3 hours every day in the morning doing my writing. And I still continue to write creative nonfiction essays in addition to writing books. But now I take those marketing skills and I really help writers build their author brands, learn how to market their books. And I really like to coach writers and build a sense of community around writing. So, my time right now is focused mostly on my writing, helping other writers. I lead writing retreats twice a year. And I really want to be writing books and putting them out in the world. And so my goal right now is a book a year. We'll see if I can keep that up. But I want to spend my days doing what I love most. And that really revolves around writing. So that's the focus. I hope I don't start any more businesses. It's just too many to keep going,
With the way that technology is growing, it is so hard to stay in front of your market because it keeps shifting.
Yeah, it's true.
It seems like almost on a daily basis, there are new sites popping up that people are gravitating toward. And by the time you get there and get set up in it, the next thing has come along.
Yeah, I don't really give into trendy marketing as much because I think that it's important to take on the channels that are going to be fun for you and where your audience is primarily. And so, that's one of the things I talk about a lot with authors is dialing in on your audience and working on building relationships with them. I take a real relationship approach to marketing because when you're building relationships, that will ripple out and that will create word of mouth opportunities. And that's way more powerful than quick hit, get somebody in and then you have to get the next new person. And that's the problem with working on getting as many new people in as possible because you're always working hard to do that. Whereas if you build relationships with your audience and they buy your book and they love it and they love you, they're going to keep coming back every time you have something new to offer. So that's how I focus on marketing and not to be overwhelmed by or swayed by all the many channels because they may not be for you, or they might, but just to give yourself that permission to be selective and take your time in deciding which channels to use.
How important do you think it is for authors to have a media package ready to go whenever they're talking to somebody? Like I got yours from your publicist where it has a short bio, your expert topics, things that you have been featured on, links to your major sites. Mm-hmm. How important are those things to have ready to go?
I really think it's important, and that's because I work in marketing. And so when I worked with the cover designers on my book, I said, hey, could you also create a media kit for me so I can send this around? But see, my marketing focus for Woman of Valor, my novel, is speaking engagements, book talks, being in person with people or on Zoom, on virtual, but really connecting with my audience. I'm doing social media. I write a weekly Substack. I do all kinds of marketing channels, but I believe the best way to market my book is to gather with people. And so that's where that media kit comes in really handy. If you're focusing just on, say, social media for your marketing, I don't know that you need a media kit, but it's a really useful tool and it's not hard to create. So why not, right?
Well, it's like one of the things for somebody like me with my podcast, I also do a lot of promo images that I share across my social media for the authors that come on my show. I have started the Book Banter magazine that I'm putting articles and buy links for the authors so that people can look in there and pick out all the authors and click and just go to buy their book. Mm-hmm. And it's incredible how many people do not have a headshot ready to go, let alone a media kit to work from.
Yes. Well, it's really interesting because, I have my podcast and I ask for a headshot for the graphics, and sometimes either people don't have it, like you said, or they send like the grainiest, weirdest shot. And I'm like, where did this come from? And with iPhones and cell phones that have such great cameras on them, there's no excuse. I mean, we can take a photo so easily. You could have your spouse, your neighbor take a picture for you, and it can be really high quality. So I don't know. I feel like that's an easy thing to do that you don't have to spend a lot of money for. I mean, I've done photo shoots because I like to invest in the marketing and PR, but I just think that there's really no excuse. And how you put yourself out there is how people learn to engage with you. And so you want to really take it to the highest level that you can, for sure.
With somebody who is talking about really engaging with your audience, when someone is a guest on a podcast and you can hear that they're typing on the computer while they're doing the interview or they're doing things around their house, how do you think that impacts the message that they're sending to the listeners?
Okay, I have to say, I've never had that happen that I know of. And if I did, I would be horrified. And I might actually not publish the interview because I feel like that's incredibly rude and shouldn't, I mean, you're getting an opportunity to be interviewed on a podcast. So why would you be distracted or have background noise? So I hope it hasn't happened to you, Diane. Has it happened?
Many times.
Oh
I
my God,
am a very good editor.
oh my God. Thank God you are, but I'm so sorry. That's terrible. And all listeners should be hearing this. Do not do that. That's a big mistake. And like I said earlier, I believe that marketing is about building relationships with your audience. So if you're not focused or distracted, that doesn't build a good relationship. I mean, you would never do that on a date or with a friendship or something. And I just don't know. I don't think there's an excuse for it. I really have a hard time with it. And I think, a lot of authors want a traditional publishing contract for a lot of great reasons. But one of the big ones that I hear is because, oh, I can't do the marketing. Well, I'll tell you, most of my friends who have traditional contracts and my first 8 books that were published by publishers, they still have to do a lot of marketing on their own. So even if the publishing house does its share of marketing and maybe even gives you a few days with a publicist or whatever, I know a ton of people who have to put their own money and time into either hiring people or doing it themselves because that's the only way. They just don't do it for you. So it's just not an excuse. I can't abide by it. I don't think it's okay.
Have you ever had any clients that you're coaching think that it's not important to hire a professional editor, that they can do their own editing?
I don't. And I'm very adamant about the importance of that when I teach and when I coach, because I'm a great editor, but I will not be great at my own stuff. I can't see it clearly. I'm too close to it. But the thing is, I always coach writers. If it's your first book, you need a developmental edit, and then you need probably a copy edit and proofread. If you've had other books out, it's still good to have maybe not a developmental editor, but an editor who can go through it and give you feedback in some way. I do know people who say, oh, well, I'm going to have beta readers, or I'm going to ask friends or my writing workshop or whatever to take a look at this instead of paying for it. And I'll just say for that, like, you might have somebody very generous and talented in your writing workshop that will do a great job. But more often than not, you get what you pay for. And so I really think it's important for people to hear that. This is a business. Take yourself seriously. And you don't have to break the bank, but you do need to have an editor who's unbiased, who is paid for their talent at looking at your manuscript and giving you honest feedback. There's just no substitute for it. So yeah, I would never encourage a client of mine or writer that I'm working with to do it all on their own, because we just can't.
And with all of this work that you have done in the nonfiction realm, what motivated you to move into the fiction realm?
So I always wanted to write fiction, and I've been dabbling in it for like 20 years. I actually wrote my first novel in the year 2000, and I spent 9 months at a coffee shop, 3 mornings a week, just to see if I could do it. And so I wrote a first draft of a novel, sent it to 5 friends to read who are writers. They gave very good and critical feedback, and I put it in a drawer and was like, oh gosh, I don't know if I can do anything. And then I came back to it like 5 years later, rewrote it, sent it back to them. They gave more critical feedback. It went back in the drawer. It's still there. So I've been trying to write fiction for a long time, and I just don't think my writing voice was developed enough to write a book I felt needed to be out in the world until now. And I'm really, really proud of Women of Valor. And I actually love writing fiction. I mean, I've written 6 nonfiction books, and that comes from my journalistic roots. It's easy to interview and research and put it all together. But there is so much creativity and fun for me in writing fiction that that's all I want to do. I like creating the characters, the plot lines, the scenes, like the rising action. It is so much fun and it can go anywhere. So I just have a great time with it.
So now tell us about Woman of Valor.
So Woman of Valor, I'm so proud of it. I know a lot of writers say that they get sick of their book at a certain point. I haven't gotten there. I really like this story and it was fun to write and it's fun to hear from people who read it. And it's a story about a young woman from Michigan who moves to Chicago. She chooses to become religious in Judaism, falls in love with a great guy, gets married, they have 3 kids, life is great. And then one of their kids is abused at his school. And the couple have different responses. They're both outraged, but they want to take different actions. And it causes a rift for the first time in their marriage. And around that time is when Sally's ex-boyfriend comes back into her life online and says, I never should have broken up with you, which is what prompted her to become religious in the first place. And so that's the premise of the book. And it's sort of, what happens? And can she stay in this community that she chose and that she loves when it's not perfect? It's not aligned with her. And so I won't give any spoilers, but that is pretty much the story.
That sounds really intriguing. And it seems like so many of the experiences that actually do happen in life. It would be interesting to read how she does decide to deal with the situation.
I think that it's pretty realistic. I mean, these things happen in all communities. I made a decision when I wrote Woman of Valor that I wanted to create a book that showed a beautiful experience in the Orthodox Jewish world, because there are so many stories out there about people in more extreme religious circles who don't like it or who have really oppressive experiences. And I felt like I don't need to add to that. There's so many already. What about a book that showed love and happiness in a choice like that, which is not the story we normally hear? We think that's anti-feminist. It's most people judge it, basically, is what I would say. So I worked really hard, and I'm not Orthodox anymore. I left that world. So it was definitely a deliberate choice on my part and not mirroring my experience, because I did leave it. It did not end up working for me, but I didn't want to produce a story that was disparaging. I feel like a lot of books are about how difficult life can be, and I just don't want to write them. I don't even like to read them, to be honest. I like happy endings. I like love stories, and there is always conflict and challenge, but we overcome it, and that makes us stronger. And I feel like that's a satisfying outcome, and that's what I like to write.
Now, I would bet money that you are a plotter.
Well, I was not. So by nature, I'm a pantser, and writing Woman of Valor, I literally had to, like, a quarter of the way through, open a new document and go through and say, well, who are these characters and who's connected to whom, and just to keep track of it. So after that experience, I really taught myself to plot. And so for my next novel, which is in revisions right now, I spent a month plotting that one out, like a full month. And it made it so much easier to write. I did character sketches. I did a beat sheet. I really plotted it out. And I have those documents so that I can refer back to them for reference. And it helped me in the writing and the revision. So now I'm a converted plotter for sure.
See, I can totally understand that, because I have my Into the West Saga serial, which is a historical fiction series. And there's 7 books in that. They're novellas.
Okay.
And I did the whole thing as a pantser.
Okay.
But I kept notes as I was going, because I knew I was going to have to remember things as the series progressed. Mm-hmm. And I spent so much time having to dig through my little handwritten notes that I would put on different scrap pieces of paper for things that I thought I would need to remember later. And by the time I got to that last book, I was going insane trying to find the information that I needed in these wild mound of notes that I had. Wow. So my husband, I'm getting ready to start 2 new books, and my husband bought me a program called Plotter.
I didn't even know there was such a thing. That sounds so cool.
Oh, it's amazing. You can form a timeline. It has character sheets. It has everything you could possibly need. And you can just like click and go through all of your information for your book. And I'm like, thank you.
He sounds like a great guy. And I'm definitely going to check that out. That sounds so wonderful.
Now, this is the part of the show where we like to do 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but we still keep doing it anyway, just because.
Thank you.
So question 1, what is your favorite Shabbat meal?
Ooh, that's a good question. Do I have a favorite Shabbat meal? I love making challah from scratch. So that is something that I do and I've done for a long time. And I love experimenting with challah recipes. Do I have a favorite Shabbat meal? I like to make a lot of different salads. And so I usually have like a main of some sort, roast chicken or fish or whatever. But I love to have all different, almost like an Israeli type of meal where you have all these different little bowls of salads.
Oh, yeah.
And just using a ton of vegetables, which is much easier in Michigan in the summer. But I get creative and I'll do like a sweet and sour eggplant or, cucumber, tomato, avocado salad. I just like to put all different kinds of vegetables and combinations of vegetables and sauces out. And I just think that that feels fresh and flavorful and it's a lot of fun. So that's usually my favorite.
And as a vegetarian, that sounds really good to me. So question 2, which is more important, building your social media presence or a mailing list?
Oh gosh, hands down a mailing list. There's no question because that is your dedicated audience. They want to hear from you. They've opted in so you can have meaningful conversations, deepen a relationship with them, and you always hold on to that list. Whereas social media can be fleeting. God forbid, a million times anything happens to your account. If it's shut down, you may not get it back and you may not get your followers back. So it's really important to have your list of followers who want to be in touch with you on a regular basis.
So question 3, in your book, Flavors of Faith, you talk about holy breads. Which one is your favorite?
That's another good question. So, there's a lot of really good bread recipes in there, including my challah recipe, which was fun. I think that it was interesting to learn about hot cross buns, which is, I'm not Christian, so I didn't know anything about it, but they're sweet. They have a glaze and that's really fun. But there are 2 I would mention really quickly. One is there's a chapter on pretzels, which have a Christian root. So you should read the book and find out why. Mm-hmm. But making pretzels with my kids when I did the book was so much fun. And I have a couple kids who just love pretzels. And so it was really fun to learn that we can make them ourselves. And then everybody's favorite chapter is the Muslim chapter when I go in the mosque, probably because of the interfaith nature. And in this day and age, I think it's even more important to read that chapter because, I went into this mosque in Dearborn, Michigan. It's I think it's the largest mosque in North America. And the women there have been baking bread for 50 years. And their bread sales, which are cultural, not religious, have really kept the mosque afloat. They sell like $250,000 worth of breads in a year. Mm-hmm. And so that helps the mosque stay open and take care of all the expenses. And in that chapter, I write about how I saw all these similarities in the Arabic words to the Hebrew root words, like, they're sister languages. And so the way that the mosque was set up was very similar to my childhood synagogue. And all the women who were trying to feed me were just like my mother or my grandmother. So I just saw all these similarities and I thought, absolutely breaking bread together is how we break down barriers and diminish hate in the world. So that was a really fun chapter. And that bread was delicious. Mm-hmm. But they would not tell me what their spice mixture was. So to the best of our ability, we have a recipe in there that you can try, but I guarantee it won't be as good as what they bake. So, we did our best.
Now, question 4, which is easier for you to write, fiction or nonfiction?
Ooh, I want to say fiction. My gut reaction is to say fiction because I get to create whole worlds and it's all up to me. Nonfiction, sometimes, especially when I'm doing creative nonfiction essays, if I'm writing about a time or experience I had in the past, what if I don't remember all the details? Like, what if I didn't take notes about it? So that can be stressful. I mean, and we know that creative nonfiction is true to the best of our memory because you can't possibly remember every single detail or moment or whatever, but that's stressful to me. I do love writing creative nonfiction, but that is the only thing that stops me up is when I can't remember exactly how something was. Mm-hmm. So I, of course, research or, try to find out. But fiction, I don't have that limitation. So I think in a way it's more freeing for me.
So question 5. We know that Woman of Valor is a work of creative fiction, but how much of you is in it?
It is totally fiction, Dianne. It is not me. People ask me this all the time, so you are not alone in that question. But yes, I was Orthodox for 10 years. Yes, I have 3 kids, but that's really it. I wasn't even Orthodox in the way that Sally is in the book. You know, she was in a much more religious community than I was, and I never wore a wig. I'm not a runner in any stretch of the imagination. And I definitely did not have an interest in an ex. So, you know, I think there are things that I knew from my life that I could put in there as knowledge or detail or whatever, but most of it was from my imagination and some of it was from research. You know, I had to research how Orthodox Jewish women would run because they dress modestly and cover up. And so what would you wear? Or, you know, I'm not from Chicago and it takes place there. And so I had to really research neighborhoods and streets and, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's totally fiction. It's not me.
Now, I've been asking a bonus question of everybody because with us going into the holiday seasons, because there are so many gift giving holidays that go from November through January, what is your best gift suggestion that you can buy for a writer and for a reader in your life?
That's a tough question. I think I get really stressed buying gifts. Here's the thing. I like to buy a gift when I see something or think of something for a person that I know well, and there may not be an occasion, and I just do it because I think they'll love it. When I'm faced with a specific reason, like a birthday or a holiday, that I find stressful because what if I can't find something? I'm also married to someone who is impossible to shop for because he like doesn't need anything, doesn't want anything. So my answer to that would be highly specific to the person. I like to give experience gifts. I do that a lot for my kids because they have enough stuff. So like tickets to a play or a massage gift certificate or let's go to an art museum together. I don't know. So an experiential gift I think is really powerful. I'm also a huge fan of books, which I think you could probably relate to.
Yes.
So I do love to find books that people will enjoy because I like supporting authors. And because a book is like going on vacation, you go to a totally different place and time, and it's just amazing. My dad used to say when I was a kid, he would take me to a bookstore and he would say, books are knowledge and you can never have too much. Mm-hmm. And so I would meet him at the cash register with like a huge stack of books and he would buy them all for me. So I have no self-control in a bookstore, again, evidenced by the stacks in my house. But yeah, I that resonates in my head that books are knowledge and you can never have too much. And I think that's so true. So I think that's what I would do. Yeah.
Definitely. I completely agree with that. And what's really sad, and this can probably give you chest pains just hearing this. When I moved from the United States to Europe, I had to get rid of all of my books.
Oh, I just got chills. That's like devastating to think about.
I have been slowly converting what I had because I kept a list of everything that I owned. And I've been buying it in digital form so that whenever we move around, I have my entire library with me in my hand.
I love that. I love that. That's so smart. I will say, I had a Kindle years ago, and when I traveled overseas, it was so helpful because like I'm the person who packs like, 5 books in my suitcase, and then I'm buying 10 books when I'm there, know? So that's really smart to have a digital format, but I don't love reading on a screen.
I don't either.
I like holding a book, but I get what you're saying, and I think it's practical because these stacks of books are just not good. They're just not good,
So what is next for you?
Well, my next novel is, like I said, in revisions. And because I've been so busy with the book launch and then I had hand surgery, it's sort of been sitting on my desk, literally sitting on my desk because I printed it because I want to read it hard copy before I get back into it. I'd like it to be fully revised and ready to go by the end of this year so that I can really work on the production of it in early 2024. And my goal is to have it out, I'm thinking by summer of next year, maybe fall. And I did learn from the book launch this year that I can't do a book launch and lead writers retreats in the same month. So that means September and October of 2024, I can't do a book launch because I have retreats both months. But after I finish this book, I'm on to the next book. And I just want to keep writing new books and creating new worlds and building my audience too. Part of launching Women of Valor includes going on a book tour to speak in different places. So I have a bunch of speaking engagements planned throughout 2024, and I'm working on planning some additional ones. And I just see that continuing as I go forward, going to more communities, speaking to more book clubs, and just building my relationships so that when I have a new book come out, people are excited to read it.
Now, how far in advance do you suggest that people start publicizing the book that they've got coming out?
I think 6 months is really great, and doing it strategically. So it's not, all book promo all the time, but, cover reveal, sharing the blurbs that people wrote for you, some of the behind the scenes details. And frankly, you could do it sooner during your writing process. You could have images of your writing, like I light a candle, I have certain playlists. I could, do that and say, I got, 1,000 words done this morning or whatever. And so it builds that excitement for your audience. But I think 6 months of dedicated promotion before a book is going to launch so that you can get people excited to be at the launch and to buy the book or to pre-order the book. And then after that, you have to realize, which can be a rude awakening, that once the book is out, that's when the marketing really starts.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you have to be really getting it in people's hands and motivating sales, and that becomes part of your life. So what I do is I devote a half day every week to marketing, and I try to really contain it in that time so that it doesn't consume me and I can really focus more on writing. But you do have to accept that it's going to be an ongoing effort.
This has been absolutely fabulous. Is there anything that you think that our listening audience needs to know about you and your work that we have not covered?
Well, we've covered a lot and I love it. I teach a lot of writing classes, and I do have some spots open in a couple of programs that I run for 2024. The writers community, I have something called the accountability cohort, but nice. I also do a free monthly write along, which is a Zoom on usually the first Saturday of the month. And it's free and it's great. People get together and they write in community. I give prompts, but you can also work on your own writing and process. And it's really a supportive and encouraging community of writers. And so you can sign up if you want to go to my website, lynnegolodner.com. And there's a page called Write with Lynne, and Write Alongs has its own little box and all the dates are there. So I just like to create opportunities for writers to commune and to connect. And I would love to chat with anybody who hears me on this podcast.
And that is so important. I cannot stress enough how much you can learn from other writers, just having those casual encounters where you're getting together to work on projects. Because here in Germany, there are so few opportunities for me to get out and interact with other English-speaking writers that whenever I would get that chance, it is amazing the things that I have picked up from other people in communities like that.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's really important, I think, because writing is such a solitary pursuit and it can be lonely and you can have a lot of self-doubt. And so having a community that you can tie into and feel boosted by is so essential.
Well, and on top of that too, whenever you're writing something for mass consumption, like you're actually wanting to publish, the way that you write and explain things may make perfect sense to you, but not make perfect sense to the person reading it.
That's true. That's why it's great to have feedback from people who are your audience and who can give honest and good feedback for sure. The truth is that I have hired writing coaches myself. I mean, listen, I'm a writing coach. I have an MFA. I have 9 books out. I've paid people to coach me because I know that my writing can always improve and I can always get better and I don't have all the answers. And so it's so important to get that feedback, to be open to it, to go in search of it at every stage of the career. Even people who have, 20 books out, it's really helpful still to hear from somebody else. Does this land? Does it make sense?
Absolutely. And I will make sure that there are links in the description of the podcast so that people can just click and go and find your website and to sign up for your writing sessions.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You are absolutely delightful. This has been wonderful. I have learned some great things from you today. That's one of the things that I love about this podcast is I learn so much that makes me a better writer.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Dianne. It's been such an honor to be on this podcast with you.
So there you have my interview with Lynne Golodner. If you are an author and you are looking for somebody to help you organize your story and get it ready for publication, go seek her out, check out her services. And if you're a reader who's looking for something fantastic to read, check out her catalog of work. If you like nonfiction, fiction, poetry, she has something for all of you. Now, don't forget, we also have our November issue of Book Banter magazine, which is available right now on our website, burkhartbooks.com. I am currently working on the year-end book buying guide, which I am hoping to have ready to go before Black Friday. So if you're getting ready to do your shopping for the holidays, it will be available for helping you to find books for anybody in your life, no matter what they like to read. We've got fiction, we've got nonfiction, we've got every genre you can think of. We have cookbooks, and there are recipes from our cookbook authors in this issue as well. I'm also working on the December issue of Book Banter magazine, which you are going to love. If you have ever enjoyed any Disney movies, you're going to love our feature author. We actually have J.B. Kaufman, who is a world-renowned movie historian, but has put out a series of books that explain the backstory behind a lot of the famous Disney movies. You're going to be fascinated by this. Who would ever imagine that a cartoon could help win World War II? If you read his book, South of the Border with Disney, you can find out all about it. So be sure and check out our December issue so that you can learn everything about J.B. Kaufman that is relevant to his body of work. And now I think that's enough for today. I've got so much work to do. I need to get back to it. So it's time for you all to go forth and be happy.